Today on the bench, I have a Ruger Mark III 22 caliber pistol. The owner said that the bolt doesn't retract, and he is right. When he described the problem to me, I knew exactly what the cause was, and chances are, if you own one of these, have taken it apart and put it back together again, you do too. And that is this. There's a hammer strut that has to hang down at exactly the right angle to engage a recess in the mainspring housing back here. And you do that during reassembly, and you have to tilt the gun a certain way to get the thing to drop down and engage the doodad, and it's tricky, and I'm gonna guess that no one's ever done it 100% of the time. I think my hit rate on this got to be about 70 or 80% over the years, and I used to own one of these. So it's a funny little problem. It's an idiosyncrasy of an otherwise fantastic gun, and this one doesn't look like it's been used very much at all. I don't know if he's fired it. I don't know how long he's owned it. Chances are also good with this that it's going to behave just like a new gun, and it's going to require a little bit of force to take it apart and put it back together again. In fact, if you look in the owner's manual for these guns, it tells you specifically there's 3 times where you may need to use a hammer in order to get this thing apart and back together again. I think it's kind of weird to design a gun that way, where you're going to have to smack it with a hammer a few times to get it to do what you want, but such is the case with these. The Ruger Mark series have been around a long, long time. They're an excellent, excellent gun, very reliable. If you understand the idiosyncrasies with it, they're worth owning, but they can be a little frustrating, and there are other 22 caliber pistols that are not designed this way. So when you shop around for guns, look at this video first and make sure you understand all that's involved in owning this gun and maintaining it, because it might just color your opinion away from this to go for something else, but the prices on these guns are very good. They have a variety of different styles within this family line, and there's something for everyone when it comes to target shooting on these. They're great guns. So let's start with removing the mainspring housing, and you do that by pulling this lever outward and down. But you can't do it using your bare hands. It's spring-loaded, and the spring is simply too strong. So you have to use a tool. The preferred and recommended tool by Ruger is a bent paperclip. I use one that's actually coated with a plastic coating because I don't want to damage the finish. Do not use something like a screwdriver or a knife blade, because that will scratch your finish. And the spring is pretty strong, so you might also damage the tool you're using. You just take this loop and work it behind that lever. I'm trying to get you the best view I can here, and then pull it down. Once that lever is down, this should swing out, and then you just pull straight down on this assembly, and this bolt stop pin should drop down. And I'm at the point right now where, like I said before, this is probably a new gun, so it does not drop down on its own, which means we're gonna have to knock that with a hammer. Before I contact anything with any force, I usually cover it with some tape to make sure I don't damage the finish, but I am using a soft-faced hammer. So this has 2 types of plastic heads on it. One's a little softer than the other. Either is fine for use in this particular application. Now, I also recommend that before you do any of this work, you read the owner's manual. I've done these a million times, but I still have a copy of the instructions from Ruger on this, just in case there's a thing that I missed. Because these guns are so idiosyncratic, I run the risk of forgetting to do something. So with the mainspring out like that, tap down on the bolt release pin. It did get it to move a little bit. We're gonna have to go a little bit further, and I'll have to use a punch, which means I'm also gonna have to take this over to the vise. With my soft jaws in the vise, very gently tap that pin. And there's the whole assembly. Now, what I was talking about earlier was this recess right here. That has to accept the hammer strut And we'll get to that later, but at least want to show you what the mainspring assembly with the bolt stop pin looks like. Next, we remove the bolt. You do that by inserting an empty magazine into the grip, pointing the gun upward and pulling the trigger. That gets the hammer out of the way, and now the bolt will slide out. If it doesn't do that, you might have to reach in through the back here, and you can see the hammer right here. You might have to manipulate that, just poke it, move it forward or back to try to get it out of the way, because it could be causing an obstruction that does not allow the bolt to come out easily. You should not have to use any force to get this out. Now we have to remove the receiver here, and this just slides on, and there's a tang in the back that keeps it all together. But because this is so new, it's not easy just to pull the receiver off. So we're going to have to hold it by the grip and tap it with a hammer to move the receiver forward and slide it off of that tang. Use a rag or a towel so that if you hit it too hard, you don't send the receiver flying. Here's a receiver. This is fully disassembled for any cleaning and maintenance. Further disassembly is not recommended. So it's a little difficult to clean because there's no easy open access to anything. You have to kind of go through and into stuff here. But this is as fully disassembled as it gets. As far as the frame goes, this is also as fully disassembled as it gets. And as we look in here to see just how dirty it is, it's really not that bad. You can see a bunch of dust and lint that builds up. That's normal, but this certainly doesn't look like it's been used very much. There's a little bit of dirt and fouling on the hammer, so this does lead me to believe that it's been shot a few times. And if we look in the barrel, see if we can get you to see down there. I don't know if you can get a good view of it. Just looking to see if it's clean or foul looking, and it does look like there's some build up in there. Although, now that I look at it a little more carefully, not much. I doubt this gun was really fired much at all, if at all, because that barrel is really clean. I'm just holding it up to my video light here and looking at it, and there's nothing but a few small particles in there. You might be able to get a better view if I use my barrel light. This is a cool little plastic tool that you stick in the end of the barrel and then point this end toward a light source, and the light then bends down here and lights up the end of it so you can get a better look. I'm going to try to get you a better look inside the barrel here. It's tough on video because you really want to put your face right up to it, but you can't. And I don't have a great light source for this barrel light right now. Yeah, it's kind of tough to see. But that is a very clean barrel. Next, I'm going to take off the grip panels. Every time I do a cleaning, I remove grip panels because it's a great place for dust and dirt to collect. I also look at the underside of the grip panels because a lot of times the edges will be dirty. Be careful anytime you remove grip panels. Some guns are designed so the grip panels themselves hold some of the components in place. I don't think that's the case with the Ruger Mark series, but just be careful that if you turn it over, something doesn't fall out. And this panel does have some buildup of oil on the edge. That's normal. And you can also see where that builds up to on the frame. Let's get to cleaning. I use Hoppy's 9 solvent. This has been around forever. I've been using it forever myself, and I've always had terrific results with it. Not necessarily an endorsement for these guys, but it's what I recommend because it's what I know. I've actually never used another solvent, so I don't know if there's a performance difference in any other brand. These guys are the de facto. They've been around forever, and the nice thing about their product is it removes corrosion and other corrosive agents that you'll get from primers. It removes carbon and other discharge buildup that you'll find in the gun, and it is safe for use on all surfaces. On a blued surface, you want to make sure that you use something that's safe for it, because if you use an oxidation remover like an acid-based solution, white vinegar for example, or other commercial products that may use acid in their products, it will remove the blued finish, because the blued finish is there by oxidation too. So where it removes one oxidizer, it removes others, and the blued finish is in jeopardy if you use an acid on it. People have told me that it's also not good to use on stainless steel, so I tend to not use any acid-based products on any gun. I've been getting great results using the Hoppe's 9, so it's what I go to. And I just do a thorough going over on all internal and external surfaces. If I see a particularly heavy buildup somewhere, I'll let this sit for a while. Now, if you're wondering why I'm cleaning a gun that's always very clean, it's because when a customer gives me a gun, it gets 1 hour of bench time, no matter what it takes. And that costs 60 bucks. So I'm not just going to charge them $60 to put the hammer strut back in place, because that takes about 12 seconds. So to make sure he gets his money's worth, I am giving this a thorough going over, cleaning, and inspection. Make sure that you pay particular attention to the bolt face, because that will get dirty, as this has been fired a few times, and it gets dirty quick. Depending on the kind of ammo you use, it may get really dirty. So this requires a thorough cleaning too, and there's a lot of recesses in here that need to be paid particular attention. If you look at this bolt and you see how the bluing stops and kind of fades away and gives way to the clean metal, note that this is not due to wear. This is like this from the factory. You can see some wear indicators here where you see the bluing kind of missing, but where the edge of the bluing happens, that's from the factory. This is perhaps my favorite tool. This is called a spudger, S-P-U-D-G-E-R. It's just a plastic tool that has a point on one end and a flat blade on the other, and this is perfect for scraping surfaces and getting inside of recesses and cracks and things without damaging the finish. Because it's plastic, it's soft. So it's a great way to get any buildup at all out of smaller areas where you can't maybe get the brush in there. You can also remove the recoil spring from the bolt here. That just pops out the top. If you need to get into the top of the bolt, I run a bore rod soaked in solvent down the barrel a number of times. And out of habit, I just let that soak in there while I do the rest of it. This is a funny area to get clean. If you have a toothbrush that fits in there, great, but see, it doesn't fit all the way in. Sometimes I'll use a bore brush from a larger caliber gun to go in there because it will fit all the way down. And the surface of the chamber here where the bolt face meets, make sure you clean that too, because that's going to get very dirty. The thing I like about the spudger is I can get into corners like you see in here. Trying to focus for you. And it's not easy to get in with any other tool, really. I don't want to use a metal pick because I don't want to damage any finish here, but it's great for getting in the corner there. It's a 90-degree corner where the side here meets that face. And buildup will accumulate there. So if you can get something like this, like a spudger to get in there, that's worth it. Now that I've wiped everything down, I'm going to take the air compressor to it and blow out any lint buildup or any solvent that remains hidden in any crevices, and then I'll give it a final wipe down before we do the reassembly. Now that everything's been wiped down and dried, we're going to apply a little bit of lubrication to some key points, and then we'll do the reassembly. For lubricant, I like to use this Rem oil, gun oil. It's not, again, an endorsement necessarily. I've been using this for years. It's always performed well. You can use any gun oil. Lucas makes a great gun oil in a drip bottle. After dealing with a spray like this, I actually think I prefer the drip, but I got the spray, so it's what I've been using. And then when I use this up, I'll get some more, but this has lasted me a long time. So I don't think I'll be buying any new lubricant anytime soon. So what I do on this one is I'll either spray it into a cup and then dab it on with a Q-tip, which is my preferred way. That way we're not getting spray everywhere. And I don't like to spray directly onto gun parts because it's too haphazard that way. So just take a Q-tip, wet a little bit, and then you can wipe that on in any of your key places. Anything that pivots, like the hammer mechanism, I'll put a dab of oil in there. And there's some pivot points up front here where the trigger is. I'll put some oil there. I run a light coat of oil along the recoil spring. Anytime you're oiling anything, keep it light. The heavier the oil is, the more dust and contaminants you're going to attract, and we want to minimize that. So just enough lubricant to be beneficial, but not so much that it gets gummy. A light coat along the surface of the bolt because it slides in and out of that receiver. I know parts of this are overexposed because I have light stuff and dark stuff. I'm trying to show you the details on the dark stuff. So my hands and the towel that I have here are going to be a little overexposed. Trying to get you the best view that I can. Now that we're ready for reassembly, I have cleaned my hands because there's going to be lubricant and dirt on my skin that I don't want to transfer back to the gun, so I wash those. I put a nice clean dry surface down, and the first thing we're going to do is put the grip panels back on. It's great to have a pair of tweezers around because you can pick up little hairs or pieces of fuzz that you can't get with your fingers. Otherwise, very, very handy to have tweezers. You can also hold and manipulate little screws and things. Before I forget, I'm going to put the recoil spring back on the bolt. Alright, here's where all the hoopla comes in for reassembling these. And I'm going to read to you from the instruction manual to be sure I don't miss anything, because there's always a step I forget and have to go back and look again because I think I know it all and I don't. But that's just me being dumb. So the first thing you have to make sure of is that your safety is in the fire position. The letter F is visible. If you flipped it up, you see the letter S for safe. You have to keep that down because it has to be in the fire position because we have to manipulate the hammer. So you want to keep your finger off the trigger because you don't want to actuate the hammer. And you have to look down on this to make sure that the hammer here is in the horizontal position. If it's not, you just push it down and you can see it's flat. And there's some really good tips in these instructions. If you can't get the hammer horizontal, it's because the hammer strut is caught up in there. So all you do is lift the hammer, free up the strut, and then the hammer will be able to go down to its horizontal position. And if you have accidentally rotated the hammer too far forward, it won't be able to rotate back, so you insert a magazine, and that will free it up. And then once you move it back to its horizontal position, remove the magazine. Another warning that they give you is to be sure that on the receiver, the loaded chamber indicator, which is here, is held in with a pin. And they make sure that the pin is still in place. And it is. You can see the pin underneath there. So that has not fallen out. Try to focus here for you. Jeez. So there's the head of the pin that holds the loaded chamber indicator. Next, the receiver goes on the frame. And I mentioned earlier about that square lug here. That has to match up with the recess in the receiver there. And it slides together. When you line that up and slide it together, trying to do it by hand may be futile because the rear of the receiver here has to extend beyond the frame, and it does not. See how that crescent is visible there? Right here, the receiver end here should be poking out just beyond the receiver. The receiver should be poking out just beyond the frame. So because it's not, we're going to turn this on end, and then we're going to give a little love tap with our soft-faced hammer, and see if you can see it as I gently tap the muzzle. And now you see the receiver poking out. Goes just beyond the frame. That is correct. And it's important now to keep the hammer in the cocked position, which is that horizontal position. If it's not, then you just take a magazine, insert it, turn the gun on end, pull the trigger, and the hammer should fall back if it isn't already. But you can look in the back here and see there's the hammer. So it has fallen all the way. Make sure to remove the magazine. Some other words of caution are to be sure that the firing pin stop pin is in place. That's this guy right there. That's got to be in the bolt. If it isn't, then you got to put it in there. And it normally would be. It just that if you're manipulating this stuff, something might fall out, especially because you have to tap things with hammers. So just be sure that that pin is in place. You can see it on the other side too. There. The reason why it's so important to make sure that pin's in place is because if it's not, then the first time you fire the gun, nothing's going to stop the firing pin. And the firing pin will fly forward so far it will irreparably dent the rear end of the chamber of the barrel. So it's worth the extra moment to look to make sure that that pin is there. And you also need to make sure that the bolt stop is in its downward position, otherwise the bolt won't go in. So once we're sure of those two things, you simply insert the bolt into the rear of the receiver. Now take a magazine and insert it in the gun and point the muzzle down and pull the trigger. The hammer should fall to its fully forward position. And again, you look in there and see if it does. If it doesn't, then just give it a little nudge. And you might have to push more than you think, but now it's hard to see, but the hammer is fully forward. And if you have to move the to bolt back a little bit to get the hammer to move forward while you're manipulating it, you can do that too. Now here's where the fun begins. Keep the muzzle pointing down, and you take the main spring assembly and you take the bolt stop pin and you insert it up through the receiver so that the pin comes out of the holes in the top of the receiver. And it's not always easy to get it there. You're going to have to do some manipulation. And you have to check if it's not going through easy, maybe something got misaligned. And I promise you're probably going to have to tap it with a hammer to get that up all the way. As I continue to work it through, you can see the pin just starting to make itself known by the top of the receiver. This has to protrude through the receiver, so we're not quite there because we'll never be able to get this pivoted back into place unless that's all the way up. All right, it's frustrating for all the reasons you just saw. You can tell when this is fully protruding when there's no gap between the pin and the receiver. And you can see I have to take it out and put it back in, and now it's all seated in. You can also tell by looking at the bottom here where the mainspring housing goes into the receiver, this little rectangular piece will be flush. You don't want to see that sticking out at all. Because if it is, then this won't pivot back into place. Right now we do not pivot this back into the grip yet, because here is where the rubber meets the road, and this is how the problem that it came to me with in the first place began. Now is a time where we have to swing that hammer strut into place, and it has to drop into the mainspring housing right back here. This is the hard part. And you do that by pointing the muzzle up. And when you do that, look in there and see if you can see the hammer strut. It is, you can see the very end of it here. It's this little dangly piece of metal. You just saw it move. Man, I wish it was easier to show you. It's this little dangling piece right there. And it swings freely. And we just have to line it up with that recess. All right, to make sure everything's going to be set up for success here, hold the gun, muzzle up, pull the trigger with your thumb. Look up in there, make sure that hammer strut is hanging straight down so that when you fold the mainspring housing in, it's going to engage that strut. You'll feel a little bit of resistance and then close up that latch. Now, if this all went correctly, I'm going to retract that bolt. It'll come back all the way. If it doesn't, it means I missed. And I have to open up the latch again, pull the mainspring back, and re-dangle the hammer strut to make sure it hit its mark. Let's see if I got it. Success! Bolt stays open, bolt releases, dry fire. Cleaned, lubricated, reassembled properly with a functioning bolt and firing pin, just the way we want. One final wipe down with a nice lint-free cloth, put it back in the case and return it to my customer. The struggle is real with these Mark Series pistols from Ruger. No matter how many times you've taken them apart and put them back together again, and God knows I've done it a lot myself, there's always going to be something to create some resistance. So make sure you read the directions carefully. Follow along with this video if you have to. And I hope to show you just how difficult it can be, but it certainly isn't impossible. You just have to be persistent, and you're going to have to hit the gun with a hammer way more than you thought you might. So it does feel strange, but don't worry, there's very few things on here that can break because it's really well made, entirely out of metal. And if you have a nice soft-faced hammer, you're not going to damage the finish or any of its components. Do me a favor, keep watching the channel because I've got more gun cleaning and repair videos to show you. I have a Raven P25 Saturday night special that's going to be really cool to look at. It's a unique little gun. And we'll have some air tool repair videos. Of course, our tools in the haul videos are always popular. And it's the beginning of Q3 coming up, which means we're going to have a new tool flyer drop video. So do me a favor, click down here now to subscribe so you don't miss any of it. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, use a tool. Don't be one.